episode of Video Game Voyager, the show where we take you to some fictional and not so fictional locations from the great worlds of video games, giving you a little tour of the places that we come across on our way. Today, via Assassin's Creed 3, the Remastered edition, we head to England, specifically Covent Garden in Westminster, to visit the Theatre Royal. And if you're familiar with the game, this is where the first mission of the game, the introductory mission, takes place. But today we're going to give you a little bit of a tour of this famous building. So, as you can see, we enter by the front door, as most people do, and this is the entrance to the theater. We have stairs heading up to a balconied second floor, and a main floor with candelabra, paintings, some high-class people milling about, as was most often the case. So this building was designed by Edward Shepard, and it was commissioned by an actor by the name of John Rich, who is the manager of the Duke's Company at Lincoln Inn Fields Theatre, so one of the acting troupes in the London area at the time. We ascend the stairs, 2 more stairs. We'll just take a look at the ornate designs here. Gaze down at the milling crowds. Opening day at the theater was December 7th, 1732, and the play featured that day was The Way of the World by William Congreve. He was the playwright, and it was performed by John Rich and company. John Rich actually was brought in by his troupe. They were carrying him on their shoulders in celebration of the opening of the theater. We'll poke around this staircase as well. This theater was just one of 2 in London that were granted a letters patent by the king, who was King Charles II at the time. The other was the Theatre Royal in Drury Lane. And what that meant, what a letters patent meant, was that you were officially sanctioned by the king to be able to partake in spoken drama performances at your theater. So, in other words, the king and the royal family didn't want anybody bashing them in public, so they would only give a certain select few permission to perform drama in public. And the theater mostly put on plays. In 1734, the first ballet was performed here. It was Pygmalion. And as we drift over to this side of the entrance, we're going to see a painting of Mr. Handel. Whoops, let me get out of the way so you can actually see the painting. And 1734, as well as the debut of ballet here, was also the first time that opera appeared at the theater, and that was courtesy of Mr. George Friedrich Handel. The first opera of his that was performed here was Il Pastor Fido, and he would later debut 6, at least, different operas at this theater, including, I'm going to try to pronounce these correctly, Berenice, Ariodante, Alcina, Atalanta, Giustino, and Arminio. And Handel's operas were a regular occurrence here. They had full seasons from 1734 until Handel's death, which was in April of 1754. And when he died, he actually left his organ to John Rich, who, as mentioned previously, was the one that founded the theater. In 1743, there was also a Lenten performance of Handel's Messiah featured at the theater, and that would establish a tradition of different Lenten performances that would take place. As we meander into the actual performing
Good evening,
area.
Sir. This way, please.
As you can see, the balconies on both sides. So in 1768, actually, what is believed to be the first solo piano performance in public took place here. It was by Johann Christian Bach, the son of Johann Sebastian Bach. And of course, unfortunately, the theater building actually burnt down in 1808. We are going to have a seat so that we can make our way up towards the stage here eventually.
My apologies.
Evening, Haytham.
Reginald?
I can't tell you how happy I was to hear they'd mounted this revival. Gay's best work by far. Have you seen it before?
Once. My father brought me here as a child. Though I remember little of it. I don't suppose tonight will afford me the luxury of a proper viewing either.
No, I'm afraid it won't. On to business then. Do you see him?
Because he's so great, thinks his trade as honest as mine.
He's seated in one of the boxes above.
The stairs are watched. You'll need to find another way up.
A lawyer is an honest employment, so is mine.
I already have.
Like me too, he acts in a double capacity, both against roads and for them. For 'tis but fitting that we should protect and encourage cheats, since we live by 'em.
Sir, Black Mall, that sick word of trial comes
1,000 pardons. My apologies.
So as we make our way to start climbing the facades of the balcony here, which, as you probably imagine, was just as frowned upon in this time period as it is today. You'll notice in that cutscene the last name Gay was mentioned. That would be John Gay. He is the one that wrote the opera that's being performed right now down on stage. And when I say opera, I mean the Beggar's Opera, which was more of, how you say, anti-opera at the time. London was being, I shouldn't say overwhelmed, but the Italian opera scene was hitting London hard, and John Gay wrote an opera that kind of lampooned and poked fun at it. Instead of very fancy music, it used folk songs that everyone in the audience would be able to sing along with if they wanted to. We're going to take a quick step onto this balcony here, just take a look at the stage. So the Beggar's Opera, the story was about not, princes or knights or, the high-class people that operas typically were about, but about, common criminals and the lower class, engaging in, similar activities that would often be found done by high-class people in fancier Italian operas. So it was very much a controversial play at the time. And coincidentally enough, it was actually a performance of the Beggar's Opera that allowed John Rich to come up with the funding for the theater in the first place. Today, there are some songs that had their start in the Beggar's Opera that we are familiar with. The Threepenny Opera in the 1920s was an adaptation of the Beggar's Opera. And there are two famous songs that came from the Threepenny Opera. And I'll tell you about those in a second after I pick this lock. Because we want to be able to show you what backstage looks like here. So the two songs that are famous, one is Pirate Jenny, which is not quite as well known, but it's a song that's mentioned by Bob Dylan in his book Chronicles Volume 1 as one of his more favorite traditional pseudo-folk songs that came from the Threepenny Opera. And the other one, the most famous one, is Mac the Knife.
Register of the gang. Cookfinger Jack. A year and a half in the service. Let me see how much stock loose to his engine.
So this is, although obviously set up to make for easier traversal, more or less how backstages were set up in this time frame. A lot of things stored, a lot of props, operated with sandbags.
Considering these are only the fruits of his leisure hours, I don't know a prettier fellow.
Jeremy's really burning up the boards tonight.
I'm just going to sit up here for a bit while we kind of finish this out. It's our first episode. We didn't want to go too in depth. We wanted to see how things would go, but that's pretty much the Theatre Royale, and we want to keep this as educational as possible here. Of course, because it's video games, so it should be educational. That was a tongue-in-cheek statement. And here you can see what the view from the stage would be. And this is the stage, actually, where Handel's organ was left, and it unfortunately burned down with the theater and was lost. But it was left to John Rich, who left it on this stage for display. And if you're looking for further information, I would definitely encourage checking out the Royal Opera House's website online. That is the building that currently stands in place. It's the third building to occupy this site. The first two did burn down, and although it is currently closed due to the coronavirus pandemic, there's a lot of fun educational materials there that you can take a look at the history. There's a lot about the actors, the playwrights, about Handel and his contemporaries that had many of their pieces debuted here. So thanks for watching. I'm going to go sit down in this chair behind this guy and watch the opera. And hope you enjoyed this quick introduction to video game voyages. We will see you next time.
Hey, them.